Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the first ever episode of the Late Night Humanities podcast, where me and my good friend Thomas talk all things pop culture, history, religion, politics, anything that has to do with the human experience from our 19 and 18-year-old respective uh, uneducated, unblissful brains. um, I think we're just going to start with talking a little bit about ourselves, right?
Sure.
So, I am James. I'm from Florida. I am a Christian, and I tend to fall more on the right side of cell politics. I love literature, movies, video games, all that kind of fun stuff. And I'm from Florida. Thomas, my dear friend, is very, very different from me.
I'm Thomas. I'm from the other end of the map. I'm from Michigan. I'm also on the other end of everything that James just said, at least in the first place. I'm not religious and tend to fall on the left side when it comes to politics. But I also love literature, movies, music, all that good stuff.
All that fun stuff. So, what is the topic of discussion for today? Should we just sort of talk a little bit about why we're doing this?
Sure. I think that'd be a good way to start it. I don't know. I think James and I have always had a great relationship and one where we can talk together very easily. And we always have very interesting and engaging conversations. And we thought, hey, I think maybe people would want to hear. So we thought, hey, why not start a podcast?
Yeah, I think for me the coolest thing about our friendship has always been the idea of understanding each other, and it's something that I really cherish of that we disagree on so many things, yet we always find a way to sort of try to understand each other. And I think the world would be a lot better place if people try to do that more. So we're just trying to sort of share that light, and because it's hard work. It's certainly hard work to understand each other.
Not trying to follow you through the.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
Well, I mean, and I think that's the main idea here, though, is that this is to sort of help people who have people that they don't agree with or have a hard time with in their life, and try to sort of overcome that gap, and at the same time having fun and talking about movies and culture and stuff, because there always is common ground.
Oh, for sure.
I find.
And I thought about this, not a ton, but a little bit. I was thinking about, what do I want to get out of this, experience. And I was thinking, well, I would like to show people that, you don't have to be a comedian to open up and, expose yourself for what you really think and feel. So maybe people will be inspired at least a little bit, because I know that I struggle a lot with that. And I think this is a way of helping me work on
that. Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely something that I sort of struggle with a lot. I try really hard, and I'm very sort of aware of it, but it's still really hard, because there's a lot of times when you sort of engage yourself with people that you're like, I don't fuck with this at all, dude. And actually, I have a really good friend who, the first time I met him, my first thought was, I'm going to hate this kid. and he was super Jesus freak, super like country boy, hillbilly kind of,
Mm-hmm.
and he drove this giant Jeep and always had the flag out the back. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but I was just like, I hate country music. I hate the whole, I'm a hillbilly and I do construction and stuff. And
Right.
especially like the sort of like shoving Jesus in your face kind of thing. I think can be really unnecessary sometimes. And so I was like, I'm going to hate this kid. And I actually turned out he became like my best friend that kind of got me through the last 2 years of high school.
Right.
And so that kind of taught me a really sort of important lesson that there's a lot more people out there who want to bridge that gap than you may think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've talked about that a little bit before, and it's always interesting because I've had similar experiences. Uh, there's a guy I know, friend of a friend kind of thing, and there are times where like I'll hang out with them and I'll be like, I literally can't stand being around this person because they're so, they think so differently from me. And yet there's other times where, I realize, we're not that similar or not that different at all. We're actually very similar.
Yeah. It kind of stems out of an earlier conversation we had where we were talking about, and I feel like we should recap it just because it's a really kind of awesome point. When we were talking about the different sort of having different religious aspects, and I was telling you how one of the most like hurtful things to hear somebody who doesn't have any religion to say is, well, as long as it makes you happy. And it's not really their fault because they just don't understand how important it is to people and how sometimes having faith is not a good thing. And a lot of times it's actually like a very unhappy thing sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was like a really interesting point we had. And then we started talking a little bit more about how it kind of goes the other way of, Christians say, oh, well, you are just so wrapped up in your emotions that, you know, of course you don't have faith because like your emotions and your selfishness are your faith. And that's really hurtful as well. And so that kind of led us to this point we were talking about doubt in our faith. Because I don't want to call like atheism faith, I guess, but at the same time, I feel like it
Well,
is a belief,
no, it is.
right?
Yeah, it's definitely a belief, I think. And, you know, it's kind of um, like white is every color and black is no color, and yet they're both colors.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
yeah, no,
Uh, but I think it's definitely a belief.
yeah. So we were talking about that, and that led you to this point about how we are all sort of on this path of the human experience and how
Right.
our doubt and our faith. And so for me, I've had moments where I've doubted in God seeing the way that, uh, kind of just the shit in the world. Um, and it's really kind of rocked me and what I believe in. And you were talking to me about how you've had similar moments. If you want to talk about that.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I don't have very many friends that most of my friends are either Christian or non-religious. Uh, I don't have a super diverse um like friend group, but at the same time, most of my friends that I've talked to about this, regardless of what they believe, have always had times where they've really struggled, whether it's tied to some life experience or just a culmination of building doubt or building faith. And it's interesting the similarities as opposed, or the number of similarities as opposed to the number of differences when it comes to those experiences.
Yeah.
Because as it turns out, at least in what I've heard, uh, most people, religious or non, have experiences like that.
And I love how it goes both ways. Like there's moments of, doubt is almost an unclear word. Moments of challenge, I would
Mm-hmm.
say. Of there's always the like the world is shit and it's all burning and going to hell and like fuck it all, that challenges like any religious person. But there's also moments that are like, damn, like I had a lot of those in like FlowNat this year of like how intricate and complex, you know, systems and animals and creation and stuff, and like how that is also a universal thing, which I wouldn't have thought of.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, and it kind of gets you back to that thread. I kind of wish we had recorded that because that was a really, really kind of cool moment that we were talking about. So
Okay, we'll get the next critical moment.
that would be the idea. Yeah, that would be the idea behind all of this. Oh, I forgot to do the timestamp at the beginning of this. It is currently 1:30 in the morning. We're sticking to our title sync on the first episode at 1:30 in the morning.
Literally.
But um, so one of the things that I've been listening to a lot of podcasts. It's part of the reason why I was so into the idea. Um, is the idea of like the reading list at the end. So what have you been reading, Thomas? What have you been watching? What have you been up to? What have you been thinking?
Well, I've been rereading one of my favorite fantasy series. Uh, The Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson, which I've talked about a bunch of times because I love it a lot. But I've been having a lot of trouble recently finding new stuff that I'm interested in reading. And I think I just kind of did my usual and said, oh, well, I don't want to try anything new. So I'll just go back to what I know.
Yeah.
So I've been reading those. Haven't been reading a whole lot else. My dad actually was just reading Caesar's History of the Gaelic Wars, though, and that really interested me, and I really wanted to read it, and I honestly completely forgot about it until you just asked me what I was reading. So that might be the next thing.
Yeah, there's a book I've been kind of flirting with. You would be proud of me for flirting with. There's a book that my sister loves called The Things They Carried. It's a fictional short story about soldiers in Vietnam, and they're taken from real life accounts. And it's called The Things They Carry because it's specifically about sort of characterizing them through whether it be like a photo of a girlfriend or a pack of
Oh,
cards. Yeah, have you read it?
I haven't read it, but one of my friends read it and said it was really really interesting. I
Yeah.
really enjoyed it. We did like a book study in English class this year, and he did that book.
Yeah,
First I
maybe.
did, actually, I think it was last year. I don't remember. I did One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which is a really good book.
I read that. What was it
Uh,
again?
they made a movie. Jack Nicholson stars in it.
What was it called again?
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Oh, I have read that. That's a
Mm-hmm.
really good book. I like the movie more.
I watched the movie before I read the book, which is
Uh,
a sin. Because I didn't realize it was a book. Um, but then when I was like choosing my book for that project, I was like, oh, I watched this movie. It was pretty good. I didn't really remember
actually,
it that much.
I actually had a really funny story about that book. So I was in a really bad place in my life when my English teacher, who believed in me tremendously, got fired, and so she knew it was her last like year, but she couldn't tell anyone,
Mm,
and so she had me in her room, and she was like, "Just pick out whatever books you want off my shelf, and you can take them." So I'm scrolling through, and one of them is has this painting of this dude just standing on the roof, and it says "One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest." I had no idea about the movie, which is really weird. So I picked up the book and I read it, and it was a really cool experience for me. I don't know. It's very my problem with the book in comparison to the movie is it's very Animal Farmy, where the like socialism commentary is very like on the nail,
mm,
or
mm,
where it's just so in your face. It's like, okay, I get it. Um,
right. Overt.
which is which is interesting. There's a very interesting shift that I find really fascinating from the book in the movie, is that the book focuses so much on God, I forget his name.
Um,
The the janitor character. It's from his perspective.
oh,
Not
uh,
the janitor. The He always like carries around a mop and stuff.
is it Chief, the Native American
Yeah, yeah,
guy?
chief. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and the movie
Murphy.
switches the perspective.
Murphy's the main character.
Well, I would
Murphy.
say
Murphy.
in the movie he is. In the book, not really. In the book, it's more of this crazy world is from Chief's eyes. In the
Right.
movie, it's sort of like it's from
It's like
Murphy's eyes, which I think is sort of interesting. Like one of the things that I liked about the movie is the movie takes something that you know from the very start of the book, is that Chief is more than what he's letting on, and
mm,
makes it into a twist of where Murphy learns that people, and I feel like that lesson that he learns is way more prevalent in the movie, is Murphy learns that people are not always as they seem,
mm,
which is something I think is really interesting, because Murphy's character is so, I mean, it's the reason why he plays poker with them. It's because he's got their number. He knows exactly how they work. He knows how they tick, and he just feels like he knows everyone in there. It's sort of old news to him, and
mm,
so I think having that sort of surprise character gives a sort of um, interesting nuance to both his character, but also Chief's character. Of,
mm,
Murphy is such this sort of ambitious and selfish and bombastic character, to sort of be impressed by someone who is quiet and patient and looked over, and see the attributes in each other, I think is something that's really, really interesting,
mm.
which I guess kind of gets us back. I don't know.
Right.
What did you think?
Um, I don't really remember the movie very much. I watched the movie a while ago.
For shame.
Uh, but I remember. Well, I definitely remember not realizing that Danny DeVito was in it. Because I
Yeah.
looked up the cast at one point and I was like, what? Danny DeVito was in that movie? And then I went back and I was like, oh yeah, totally, it's Danny DeVito. But I remember I was talking to one of my friends about it, and she was, she didn't like the movie because it strays from the book. But I don't know. I never really picked up on the discrepancies, mostly because I just didn't remember the movie very well. But I remember really enjoying reading the book because I kind of knew where the story was going when I was
Yeah.
reading, which is really interesting because I usually don't like to know where the story is going. I don't like it spoiled for me. It was really interesting with One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest because I kind of had a general idea of like the underlying themes from when I watched the movie.
Yeah.
I'd have to read the book again, I think, to really
I mean, that might be it. Because for me, I read the book first, and then I watched the movie. And the reason why I like the movie more is the book is sort of him arguing his social political argument, which is cool and fine and very fascinating, honestly. But um, the movie sort of fleshes out the characters in a way the book doesn't really.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I feel like reading the book with the context of the movie would make me enjoy it more, just because I would enjoy both the intimate sort of personal moments, but also the sort of grandeur theme that he has going on in the book, which is definitely way more prevalent in the book than is in the movie. I mean, you still get the like sort of institutional satire with the nurse or whatever, but that kind of gets into like a sort of creative difference that we've been talking about between you and me, though, is enjoying the world versus enjoying the characters,
Mm-hmm.
which I think will be really fun to explore when we talk about the impact of the Lord of the Rings and fantasy. It's gonna be a fun episode.
I remember appreciating uh, the book's or the book and the movie. It's commentary on like the worth, like a person's worth, you know, because it's all about here's this group of people that society looks down on, and then thrust in uh, McMurphy, I think is his name, if I remember correctly.
I can look it up.
I think it's McMurphy, who has an over estimation of his own self worth, but at the same time deep down knows that his self worth is lacking. Throw him into that mix of people who already think they're so much or worth so much less than other people. And what made me think of it was the last. Or maybe I shouldn't spoil it. I was gonna talk about the last.
Spoilers for a book that is what 60 years old.
What do you think? Should I spoil it?
Yeah, we'll give the spoiler warning right here because I am interested in talking about the book.
I was gonna say this could set a dangerous precedent. I don't know if I should spoil it because I might be tempted to in later podcasts. But since you asked,
I can put time marks in.
For sure. The last scene is of Chief like escaping the institution, and I think it's the last line. It says something about they'd never send, they'd never send anyone after them, after Chief, because he's not worth the people they'd send. He's not worth the time and the effort, which it's just very interesting to me.
Well, I mean, as someone who is very talkative and very sort of outgoing and loud and stuff, that is something that I really envy is and one of my best friends is a very quiet person, and the reason why I admire that so much is that whenever he says something, you listen. It sort of adds a gravitas to it,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a sort of air of surprise and dedication and premeditation to what they're thinking, what they say, what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's one of the coolest parts is that Chief has this whole thing planned out already,
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of, I think it sort of speaks to his character is that he's neglected and he uses that as his weapon.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, that kind of gets at the whole. And I mean, that's one of the things that I think is interesting is you can sort of translate that back to the book where in the movie it's sort of more focusing on that's who he is and that's how he is as a character. But um, what Ken Casey is the name of the author. I totally butchered that. And I'm going to feel terrible about it. But what he seems to be more talking about is sort of that's the revolution. You know, that's how you get back at society is they neglect you and they don't see what you do.
Right.
And I mean, you can attest to this too with, you know, how many revolutions are done through the revolutionaries' wives because everyone's looking down on them and no one expects anything, you know?
Yeah. Definitely interesting.
It reminds me of you've seen Godfather Part 2, right?
No, I never actually got around to watching that. I should watch it. I know. I watched the first one and never actually got around to watching the second one.
Okay, the first one's better for sure, but I do like the second one. Michael Corleone says something. I'm gonna try to look up it did win Best Picture, but also it's just a like amazing movie. I do like the first one more. I would like to clarify that because so many people disagree with that. I think the second one's pacing is a little weird. Yeah, these are all like quotes from the actual like sort of the crazy quotes of like, you know, him talking to Fredo and stuff. He says a line in the movie. Oh, there it is. Never hate your enemies. It affects your judgment. If you downplay them, if you let your sort of emotions get the best of you and you're trying to outsmart someone or whatever, and you go, oh, you're so stupid and I hate you and you're never going to be able to beat me, whatever, you will get completely blindsided.
Like every Bond villain ever.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, it's the oldest trope in the book of the, you know, because like the villain monologue is so made fun of and parodied and stuff to this day, but it stands in for a very specific purpose. And the villain really thinks he has the upper hand, so he's like, "No, fuck you! I'm just gonna tell you everything." So I think that kind of plays into what we were saying. So I think the other thing we should talk about is what. So I think we should say our favorite movie, our favorite book, which you already said Sanderson. So I'm going to take that as your answer, and I'll let you delve into that a little bit more during the fantasy episode. And then you want to do video game and time period?
We could try it. It's gonna be tough for me to pick an all-time favorite movie, though. I actually made a list at one point. Let's see if I
Hey, you want me to go first while you're doing that?
Sure.
Okay, so my favorite movie, as you know, is The Wolf of Wall Street. That movie is a masterpiece. Martin Scorsese is amazing. Leonardo DiCaprio is amazing. And that movie is fantastic for making you feel bad about enjoying watching it, which is something that is Scorsese is really good at, is showing you the atrocities of mankind and almost sort of making you a accomplice. He talks about that a lot in Goodfellas, about how he's sort of luring you into enjoying the mob life just like all the characters are. And he does that really well in The Wolf of Wall Street. I think it's done superbly in that movie, of how it just sort of sucks you in with the comedy and the quick pacing and the sort of high life and whatever. And it's challenged me a lot about what I do and how I conduct myself, and sort of as a safeguard from being a shitty person. I'd like to think that movie helps.
I think Finding Nemo is definitely one of my favorites. That's just straight nostalgia.
I actually just watched Finding Nemo.
One of my favorite movies of all time. That movie makes me cry.
Why do you like it so much?
I was always drawn to I don't know, the way that, like, Nemo's dad cares so much about his son, never gives up, crosses an entire ocean just to find, just to find him, bring him home, make sure he's safe. I don't know, I was always very attracted to the thought of someone, like, caring about me that much. And, like, I don't know, I think subconsciously I thought that nobody, like, cared that much about me. I think that really played into why I liked it so much, because I was like, I want that.
It's kind of.
I think that's kind of a, it's not really a good thing, but I think that might have been at least part of it. Also, I just enjoy the movie. It's just a good movie.
That's kind of interesting to me, because just now watching it, Nemo's dad's arc is letting go, which is kind of a really sort of way to complex the way you sort of like the movie. Like, it almost, and I don't want to read into it too much, but it almost seems like a justification,
Yeah.
I feel like everyone's got sort of a Disney movie that they really like because of their relationship with their parents.
I really liked In Bruges.
Hell yeah. More people need to watch it. If you watch this podcast and the only thing you go away with is, I'm going to go watch In Bruges, do it. I promise it's amazing. It's entirely worth your time. It's one of the best dissections of depression and still being funny. I think that's the thing that's like so impressive about that movie, is how well it's like lighthearted, but totally not lighthearted at all. We should do an In Bruges spoiler cast, because I want to talk about that ending.
Yeah, that's a good one. I always thought that, I don't know, how they blended, like you said, because it's all about depression, and yet still manages to be one of the funniest movies I've ever seen.
And it deals with it in such a great way. Like, I don't know. I compare it to things like 13 Reasons Why, or other sort of depression awareness, whatever you want to call them, entertainment, which is kind of what it is. And it does it in a weirdly respectful way. You know what I mean? Like the scene where he's trying to kill him and he's trying to kill himself. You don't ever sort of reel back and go, oh God, that's like not okay. it makes you laugh, so you sort of let yourself go into it and really study it,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is a really, I mean, it's almost like making a joke at the start of a conversation to make it go easier, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Which is interesting because that's how I always try to broach, you know, important and hard to talk to topics. Is I always try to lighten it up.
And some people don't like that.
Yeah, luckily most of the people I hang out with are okay with it. At least they haven't told me otherwise.
Like, I have had some experiences where I have been introducing myself to someone and made a joke about how terrible my life is or how terrible of a person I am or whatever. And it's so off-standing to people, and they just stare and look at me like, okay. So it's kind of like interesting how people are different, and how some people like you and me, comedy is a very easing and soothing thing to sort of let things go over easier. But I also feel like that's just how we deal with like bullshit um, in our lives. But for some people, it's so off-putting. Like the idea of like the clown as a horror villain has always been something that's really interesting to me. Is that some people just don't like when things are too happy, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And what that says about them, I don't know.
At the same time, there have been times where people have been overly happy and I've been like, shut the fuck up.
Oh yeah. Would you say you were in a sort of bad mood when that happens?
And what happens?
When you like people are like really happy around you and you're like shut the fuck up?
Oh yeah, no, for sure. Most of the time. When I'm not already upset, usually I can deal with it. But like if I'm physically or emotionally exhausted, which I often am, uh,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's sometimes it's taxing, but it's never really. I can appreciate humor, even like dark, self-deprecating. You know.
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of the reason we get along so well, is because I can flow with it.
I think there's something really dark humor is very underrated. I and I think the universality of it is also very underrated. Like talking about In Bruges reminds me about Jojo Rabbit. We've
Mm-hmm.
talked about this before.
Mm-hmm.
Jojo Rabbit is so amazing in the way that it handles its comedy.
Mm-hmm.
Like I actually just watched um sort of a video essay online that was really interesting about Indiana Jones and about how Spielberg uses Indiana Jones as a way to sort of get revenge on the Nazis because he never makes them look cool. They're always the butt of some gag or punchline or like literal punchline joke, and he just humiliates them.
Mm-hmm.
And it was contrasted against something like Inglorious Bastards, where they're painted as this sort of villain. And the argument is that Spielberg doesn't even give them the satisfaction of being the villain. He gives them the town idiots that our hero basically just gets to beat the shit out of for 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's something very, yeah, I think there's something very versatile in dealing with pain with comedy, but also sort of almost getting the upper hand in a way.
Yeah.
Is that right?
But there's also definitely a way to abuse that dark humor. Because,
For sure.
um, I have a friend who's very against dark humor. because more often than not, when they see it, it's people using it to detriment other people instead of using it to, you know, like make fun of themselves, like we were talking about. And so they are they're very against dark humor, even when it's self-deprecating, because they associate it with, the kind of dark humor that is more hurtful than helpful.
Yeah. No. I think I think that's true. I think that's the scary part about it. Is humor can be such a powerful weapon and you can use it for good and you can use it for bad and not even know. That's like what's scary about it. Like like self-deprecating humor is a really good example of that. Is if you're really self-conscious and you're constantly saying, "Oh, I'm stupid, I'm bad, I'm ugly, whatever," and you're making a joke out of it, it can be dangerous in a couple of ways. Of one way, almost letting people think that that's okay to say those things to you, which you don't think that's okay, and also putting you in this mindset of, like, we were talking about that a little bit earlier about generalizations. When it starts being everybody hates me, that's when you start to shut those people out. And that can get really dangerous because self-deprecating humor, you almost shut your own conscious out from itself.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting the different ways people can react to different types of humor, because some people it's just their sense of humor and how, sometimes it's even how they were raised. Some people just aren't exposed to it until they start, mingling with other people that aren't like them.
How do you think? How do you think? Because if the point of the podcast is learning to understand each other and whatever,
Mm-hmm.
how do you think you overcome that? Because humor is such an awkward thing for people to talk about. I mean, that's something that's come out with the whole Black Lives Matter things. Is for a lot of people, racist jokes are not okay.
Mm-hmm.
And for example, some of us may know that, but some of us don't. And it's partly because nobody has had the guts to tell them it's not okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, let's say you're talking to a friend, you make really insensitive, whatever jokes that you have no idea how this is different. Like even like, oh, like something like I fucked your mom or something, I don't know. And maybe the kid's dealing with at home that his dad and his mom are cheating on each other or something. So it hurts a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
He's not going to say anything to you about that. So what do you think like you should do in that situation to sort of figure out what's okay, what's not okay, what's their humor, what's not their humor?
I mean, for me personally, I always, try to take it slow and like, I don't know. I think getting to know the person is, and like spending time around them is important. Uh, to learn what they think is acceptable and what isn't. But I think there are definitely times where I personally have just made a darker joke to try and like test the waters, so to speak. Try to like see if they're gonna not necessarily call me out, but like bring it up at least. And I don't know, like you said, humor is interesting because everybody's different, and even just a little. Everybody has a different sense of humor. And on the flip side of that, I think that's really cool because not only does it make for great comedy, but it also makes for great comedic interactions, in my opinion, between people that have close to or even somewhat similar senses of humor.
I think I think that's an interesting thing to sort of get into is differences are can be a challenge sometimes, but they can also be the birth, the spark of chemistry.
Oh,
You know, like for
and
me,
that's part of the reason people, opposites attract is such a
yeah, exactly. Like for
yeah.
me, I look for someone who's not like me
Mm-hmm.
because I've dated girls who are a lot like me, and it's just like insufferable because I don't like me.
Right? There's that dark humor you were talking about, folks.
Yeah. You better be of that kind of person to watch this podcast because we pull punches in the first episode, probably. But no, yeah, I think that idea is. I always think about when people talk to me about how differences can actually be a really good thing. I
Mm-hmm.
always think about my grandma and my grandpa. Have I told you about this?
Maybe.
So my grandma and my grandpa on my dad's side are both dead. R.I.P. I only really believe in relation. Yeah, they're right. Pouring out for the homies. I only really believe in relationships and the idea of love because of them. They had such this crazy, unbelievably star-crossed lovers thing that I just could never understand or explain, but I knew it just seeing it the way they looked at each other. And my grandma's eyes went, and my grandpa's ears started to go. And they were also very different. She was a very loud and sort of very critical person. He was a very sort of morals and so they always kind of had that sort of thing going for them. But when she lost her sight and he lost his hearing, it was amazing to see how they would tackle things like watching TV or playing cards. And they would do it as a unit and they wouldn't even like talk to each other. They would just work with each other to have the experience. And they used to always say, or he used to always say when she died, is he would always say she was my ears and I was her eyes. And there's something very, very beautiful about differences that I
Mm-hmm.
think make really powerful relationships.
And experiences.
Mm.
And
It's
there
certainly
again,
rare.
and there again, I think is part of the reason why we get along so well, is because that's kind of embodies, the basis of our friendship, and in part what we base this podcast off of. It's literally the thing we started with in this podcast episode was, here's how we're similar and different.
You're supposed to talk about Xbox and PS5. Damn it, Thomas.
We've got 11 minutes until the hour.
Okay, well, um, what do you think about that? Do you think that that whole idea of that kind of
Love or Xbox? I'm confused.
no, fuck Xbox. You're not talking about Xbox today. Halo Infinite looks worse than Halo 5. I'm good, fam. We can
Oh,
talk about that another day.
you're gonna break my heart.
Oh, you're excited for it? We gotta save an episode for that.
So hyped.
Oh, okay. We gotta save an episode for that because I am
I'm
not.
so excited. I'm so excited.
It's okay. You can still get a PS5 because it comes out on Xbox One anyways.
I thought about it. My little brother really wants my Xbox One. but I also just bought my Xbox One a year ago. So I don't know if I'm ready to part with it yet.
Hey, you'll still get support. All Xbox Series X titles are coming to the Xbox One. We can get into that more on the next episode.
Let's definitely, let's get back.
Because I think that's really interesting that we're both mega Halo fans and we have two very different opinions on that game. So it's going to be fun to talk about that.
Now I really want to talk about it.
Well, I'm sorry.
I know.
You were so down for the episodic version.
Right? But you're right. We should be.
All right.
What are we talking about?
Well, I should probably do the outro.
This is a very common experience when it comes to our conversation.
Yeah.
What were we talking about?
Well, we were talking about love and how opposites attract and whether you believe in the
importance of differences as well as similarities.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's all life, though, is that there's good things to things and bad things to things, and you have to learn how to get over the bad things, but also appreciate the good things. And I think that's a part that we really miss is, and coronavirus has taught us that for sure.
Oh, for sure.
Of like,
that was my kind of theme last time we talked, was exploring different perspectives, exploring people's differences, because it's important.
It's very important. And it's what makes us strong. I don't think it's what makes us weak.
Oh, for sure.
Like, if you want to say one good thing about our country, it's the fact that so many different people are in it. Mm-hmm. Of that.
It makes it so sad when people vilify people's differences.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I actually wrote a paper for school about how you're gonna hate me for this, but capitalism is an amazing thing, but also how it's also how it kills communities simultaneously. But also that's more our culture, I would say. My paper sort of talks about how capitalism isn't necessarily the problem for that. And I brought up I basically compared Bob Iger and Jordan Belfort. But in that, I talked about how our community was half-assed going to church on Christmas and going to football games on Sunday. And that is the most pitiful fucking example of communities in a nation of what, 33
million people.
33 million people.
It's like 330 million people.
Yeah, people are going to get upset about the fact that once again, we are 18 and 19-year-old kids, just trying to make our way. But and community is something that's super, super lost in the days of social media and stuff because people don't know what contact is. I hope that changes after coronavirus. Okay. I hope this is sort of that shot of tequila.
Something. I mean, it's a shame to see it so polarizing because, at least in my eyes, it should be something to bring people together almost in spite of how dividing it is. Does that make sense?
I think it was at first. I really do.
I think it was too. That just makes me think of times are tough. The world is so uncertain. Buy a fucking Subaru.
Ladies and gentlemen, the sponsor for this week's podcast, Subaru. Want to get through the apocalypse? Do it in a Subaru.
Want to get through the uncertainty of the apocalypse?
Oh, jeez.
The Subaru RAV4.
All right. I'd say that's the first good episode. I like that. That was a good conversation. Okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, it is currently 2:13 a.m. You have spent an hour in the Late Night Humanities podcast. Bidding you a good night. James, as always. Still getting the hang of it.